Please welcome Kami Dar, co-founder and CEO, Uniti Networks, Adam Bly, founder and CEO, System, and moderator Amy Nordrum, executive editor, MIT Technology Review.
Hello. Hello, everyone. It is my honor to be here with you today at MIT Solve and to be speaking with Kami and Adam. If you are not familiar with their work, Kami here is co-founder and CEO of Uniti Networks, which is a startup providing smartphones and a suite of important applications designed to run on low bandwidth networks to underserved countries and populations around the world. And Adam is founder and CEO of System, which is a platform trying to reinvent the way that we search for scientific research by collecting and linking it together in ways that he hopes will help researchers and physicians find what they need more quickly and provide more context to that information. So you're working in two very different spaces, but I think what links all of us here on stage together is the emphasis you've both had throughout your careers on the role of data in our society, thinking hard about that, how it can be used to either extract or empower individuals and communities, and of course, improving access to good information, which I know that you're both very passionate about. So we've got 20 minutes together today, and I will start by diving into my first question, which is, of all the problems that the two of you could take on in the world, why have you chosen your specific areas? And Kami, I'll start with you.
Well, let me start by saying that this specific business was not my idea. Over the course of the past few days, there's been so much conversation about negative space, finding areas that need to be filled, and this specific space of service access, my entire career has been not in mobile, but in global development, USAID, and the World Bank kinds of programs. And in this mobile space, what we have is an absence of focus on what is effectively the bottom 2 billion people on the planet. We have a 45%, 50% smartphone penetration globally, and most businesses are focused on what is essentially called the next billion. How do we get the next billion people online, from telcos to Google, et cetera? When we solve the next billion, there are 2 billion people still forgotten. And so this idea of there's a huge problem, but also when you think about solutions, it's seeing solutions that are already existent. And I know Adam's journey as well is the right time, when technology catches up with your problem in a sense. And today, smartphone costs are going down. All of the costs that are involved in delivering high-quality services is now, and it felt like the opportunity to take action.
Excellent. And Adam, why was this the problem that you decided to spend all your time and energy and focus on, organizing the world's scientific information?
Yeah, so I think the biggest issues we face in the world today are highly complex and interconnected, and I would argue becoming increasingly so. And we all experience that living through the pandemic, and so many people around the world are experiencing it firsthand with climate change. We experience it in social justice and systemic racism, in drug policy, and the state of democracy. We're seeing rising complexity in the systems that make up life on Earth, and it affects us individually and globally. And on the other hand, the way we organize the information and data we need to make decisions about those systems is anything but. It's highly siloed and highly fragmented, and it impairs our ability to make decisions in the most systemic, holistic, rational way. And I think this incongruity, rising complexity in the issues we face, and rising fragmentation and siloing in the information we need, that tension is existentially important to our ability to resolve the biggest issues of our time. And so I'm not a technologist, and I don't come to technology solutions as a bias. I'll sort of come to it because I believe that there is a kind of high leverage point potentially that we can try to make a change by innovating. And I see the opportunity right now, the need for reassembling the world's information based on systems as being something that can have far-reaching implications on any number of global issues. And so it's what I plan to dedicate the rest of my life to.
Wow, yeah. I like that thesis that good information leads to better decisions. I think it's a strong one. Okay, so Cami, one of my questions for you, we'll get to kind of talking about your specific solution in more detail, but as you look across the space, there's so many people trying to address these connectivity issues we see for the next billion or the final 2 billion that you're more focused on. What else are you seeing out there that is working? What are you seeing? Where are you seeing positive progress that you think we should all be more aware of or paying more attention to?
There's a lot, and I think we only have 15 minutes to get into it, but I think some examples are, connecting back to Adam's point here about knowledge, and is participation matters. On both sides of this knowledge economy, the knowledge producers and the knowledge consumers, if you have literally half the world's population who is excluded, their voice is excluded from the information systems that we're ingesting, we're creating large language models around. If those voices aren't included, what is the end result going to be, and who is that end result going to serve? I leaned into the negative. Let me talk about the positive. So some of the things that we're seeing are, there are groups. There's a new device that was launched, I think, a couple of months ago, called OpenG, a device that understands spoken African languages and uses AI to interpret and analyze them. In the market that we're working in today in Ghana, across the service suite that we focused on, which is health, finance, education, and work, there's a tremendous amount of innovation happening. Digital pensions, microfinance institutions, a lot of digital service delivery that, the great solutions are always 5 to 10 years away. I think when I was in university, we talked about telemedicine as this thing that was,
right,
at our fingertips. How many people are using that today? Not many. And who needs it the most? These exact communities who don't have access to the devices and the data. So I am constantly discovering and inspired. Even today in the lobby here, I discovered services that could be of benefit to the communities that we're serving, that if they had access to device and data, they could solve meaningful problems that would help reduce price shocks, increase their wealth, increase their savings. So I think it's really across the spectrum. And one thing that I just want to briefly comment on is the end of the era of free money. The innovators, when you go and try to raise money now, you need real unit economic models. It's not just about user acquisition. And so our approach is also to serve those solution deliverers by helping them find their audience. If you're building a remote health practice, how do you get the users who will use that service in the next 2-3 years? We can be a pipeline for those kinds of solutions. So we're hoping to boost the solution providers, and I think they're really across the spectrum. And here, at MIT Solve, we see people in there from 16 to 25 providing the solutions for this generation. We hope to support them as well.
Yeah. Well, and since you brought up AI, Adam, I want to ask you, since your platform uses this, how do you see more power and potential for AI to help us, really solve a lot of gnarly societal problems? Or do you think it's more likely that as AI and this technology progresses, it will reinforce the world order we already have, with wealthy, powerful countries creating these tools and being the primary users and deployers of them?
So I think this question is among the most important we face in society right now. And we're at a critical moment in the state of this technology where I believe we have a responsibility, and we still have the choice, those of us who sort of have the privilege of living in democracies, to contribute to shaping governance of these technologies. We've been here before, right, where with recombinant DNA in the 1970s, a community of scientists kind of came together, recognizing that what could happen was beyond the current literacy and capacity of government to regulate, and the scientific community needed to self-regulate. And there's been some efforts of that within AI, and yet now we've reached the point where it's mission critical, I think, that we set in stone, we articulate some shared principles for the kind of world that we want to drive toward, and how AI can be supportive of that. I think one of the worst things that could happen right now is for AI to reinforce the biases, the inequalities, the lack of representation that pervades so many parts of the world. Instead, we have an opportunity to say, we have a larger vision for where society could go. And those things have been articulated, right? Whether it's in the Sustainable Development Agenda or human rights agendas, that's where we want to set North Stars. And we have this incredible opportunity now to use new technology to help us drive towards those objectives. And so I think it's not beyond our potential right now and our capacity as a society to point this and regulate this towards a North Star that is in the best interest of the most number of people on the planet. But it's really right now where, this is the critical moment where we have to do that. One of the things I've been working on for the last many years has been how do we equip government with the advisory capacity, with the literacy to be able to anticipate these kinds of challenges. And as a brief anecdote, Congress in this country for a couple of decades had an advisory office, had an Office of Technology Assessment, and then in 1995 it was defunded. And so you think about it, for 20 years, the government of the United States, the legislative body of the United States, has lacked the scientific and technical advisory office to help it anticipate exactly where we are today, whether that was on GDPR or on AI, lacking. And so I think we also have to see this as a moment not only to resolve the issues of AI and put in place the frameworks and governance and culture that we want, but also to remind ourselves that this is the vector we're on as a society. And so it's critical that we provide government here and around the world with the advisory capacity, with the literacy that it needs to stay ahead of the kinds of issues that we're facing today.
Yeah.
I studied with Linda Garcia. He used to work in OTA.
Yeah, sounds familiar. Yeah, I mean, the explosion of interest in experimentation in generative AI in particular feels like it makes what you're saying even more urgent in this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're at there's a general theme of emergence now, whether that's in generative AI or in the nature of rising complexity in the systems on Earth itself. We're seeing the effects of emergence just resulting from rising complexity in the systems on Earth, right? So the effects of climate change are causing emergence. We're seeing more nonlinearity and emergence. And that means that we're entering a space now where we have less control over the things that come about from these complex systems, whether those are deep learning systems or those are just climate systems. These are beyond our capacity in some respects to understand how they work. We try, but highly complex systems are not necessarily designed for us to understand them and to deconstruct them. And so I think it's even more important that we're living in the world of first principles. We're doing our best to understand these systems because that's the nature of where we are right now.
Yeah, I mean, point taken. I don't think the world's going to get any simpler moving forward.
Certainly not.
So.
I want to jump in on
Yes.
the urgency thing because one of the things that stands out for us is that exponential curves are hard to catch up with, and the inequity that's baked in here is not entirely a bug. It's a feature of this colonial international system, and so the exclusion. The reason that it's urgent is because the productivity for those of us who have access to these kinds of tools is going like this. Large language models going like this. And if you're over here on your curve and you start 1 month later, it's hard to catch up. If you start 10 years later, 15 years later, it's virtually impossible to catch up on that thing. And so the urgency is something that we feel, and this idea that there's so much to be gained across the marketplace, from governance and government through to user success. Everyone has an opportunity to really succeed a lot in an inclusive market space, and so the faster we get to it, the better.
Yeah. Well, and Kami, let's talk about your solution in particular, because I do want to stay grounded, in the challenges that are out there. And, you've developed something that you think is positive for the world and can do a lot of good. What are some of the main challenges that you're facing as a designer, a developer, an entrepreneur, and, getting this solution out there? Is it, fundraising? Is it deployment? What's kind of the hardest nut to crack for you?
Well, it'll come as a little secret that it's not a great moment for fundraising. But, if you have the right solution, we feel convinced that you actually can raise the money and grow the business. The main thing is, when technology and people connect is really where the biggest pain points are. We're doing something that is fundamentally about behavior change, taking communities who are used to getting some service, not usually very high quality service. The community that we're working in, there's 1 credit union, 0 hospitals, 0 schools, so not great quality service. And we're trying to introduce digital versions of those. And so there's a lot of sort of empathetic listening that you have to do that. Particularly challenging during the pandemic to not be on the ground in those places to do this kind of work. But it's really the listening and capturing the right data, treating that data with the appropriate sensitivity, and making sure that it stays private, that it stays in service of the user needs and not in the service of some other thing that's happening. But we're really encouraged by what we've seen, and I'll give to ground it, which is one very brief anecdote. One of our partners is a pension provider, so digital access to a pension program. We're working with cocoa farmers in Ghana. When I mentioned to the CEO of that company that we were planning to drive 30% and above adoption of the pension program, he laughed and said, Kami, if you can get 2.5%, we will be happy. That will be a good conversion rate. We had 25% of the community that we started with signing up for pensions, with half of those people putting money regularly into their pension program. And so this idea that you can actually have a reduction of price shocks over time by doing something today, taking action today, is exactly the kind of positive feedback loop that we think we can build on.
Yeah. Well, as an entrepreneur, your solution is so grounded in these individual communities and the users themselves. How do you take your cues from them about what they need or what they're doing that's working for them? How do you establish that connection and feedback process for yourself and your team?
So in one sense, it's not directly our problem. The services that we're leveraging are already local services. So this pension program has 500,000 pension subscribers in Ghana before we ever got there. What we're doing is we're building a bridge between those services and the users. So the common thread is lower the barriers to access, whether those be financial or experiential. Make sure that service is accessible. So everything in our service suite today in Ghana is, with one exception, we have 2 Kenyan education services, but all the other services are fundamentally local. So all of that, and this is another important observation. If you're doing well-intentioned human-centered design and you're ignoring 50% of the people, of the humans in that process, you're not coming out with a product that serves the needs of this broader community. So our core function is connecting it with services that are already localized, and our tech is designed that if we were to go to other regions in Ghana or to neighboring countries, that we can deploy similarly localized services within our own super app.
Great. Okay, we're already almost out of time, but I do have one final question for each of you, which is, we have many entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs in the room. You're both entrepreneurs yourselves, so sometimes many times over. What advice would you have for the entrepreneurs in the room who are, starting a company or starting an initiative at this particular, complex moment of technology and its role in society? So, Adam, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly important moment to shape technology companies in particular. I'll focus on technology companies that are built with a set of values and principles and concern for the consequences of the technology they ship in the world in the DNA of the company. And the way we've done that is by structuring system as a public benefit corporation and encoding in the charter of the company from the very beginning certain commitments to open access and open knowledge, commitments to the nature of our team, to the diversity and inclusion of our team, to how we're going to use profits down the road and distribute them prior to investors accessing the company and being part of the company. And I think it's an incredibly important moment for founders who care about what it is that they're putting out in the world and the implications that it may have, especially the unintended consequences, to, from the very beginning now, present to the investor community a new generation of entrepreneurs who are going to make these things principles of the businesses that they want to create. And so I think there's an opportunity now to declare those things, to actually encode those things in the charters of these companies. So I would only emphasize that there are ways of doing this today. to both access millions of dollars of capital as we have, while also encoding these values that you hold dear within the charter of the company.
And Kemi, the final word.
I'll build on that a little bit. I think that, my favorite SDG in a sense is SDG 17, the power of partnerships. And there's this sense that, and this idea that information is siloed, yes, but also institutions are siloed. They have their own commitments. They have their own shareholders they're committing to. I think if you're an entrepreneur today, look around and see where are the opportunities, where are the adjacent, problem solvers who can reinforce the work that you're doing, and making sure that we are not reinventing the wheel. There's so much work to be done. Finding the right partners and building those shared values, I think, is a really critical starting off point for that journey.
I'll also just say simply that any founder who has been through the founder journey is almost, I think, obligated and will be inclined to answer the call of any other founder. So I would only encourage founders to reach out to founders. I certainly am always happy to do that. But know that founders understand the pain and the horror and the challenges of being a founder uniquely, and the loneliness and all of it. So just reach out to other founders.
Yeah, thank you both so much. I think that was great advice. I hope you all have a greater sense of urgency and feel more inspired than you did 20 minutes ago. I know I do. So thanks so much for your time. Great to be with all of you today.